Welcome to Decoding the Conflict Mindset. I'm Dr. Deborah Dupree, the Mindset Doc and host of this episode series. We are so excited for our 2023 season, and coming to you as my next guest speaker is Gary Miles, success coach. Gary has built his coaching program for lawyers to free lawyers up from their mindsets that may have not been serving them quite so well, based on his own 40 years of being a litigator, partner, an entrepreneur, and much, much more. He's won and lost in many cases, more winning than losing. But what he found is that he had slid into a lifestyle not quite so healthy. He shares with us his own battles with substance abuse and lack of sleep and unhealthy nutrition, and has turned those experiences into his coaching practice to help give you ideas on how you can and want to shift your life. He gives practical tools, and he'll be sharing those with us with the greatest emphasis on the pace of our current lives, the quality of our personal relationships, and then also the notion of time. And so please join us. Don't go away. Subscribe so you get notified of our next upcoming episodes. And stay tuned. Invite others to join us as we hear Gary Miles, success coach, give us practical strategies for how to make a difference, to live healthier, happier, and more fulfilling lives. Dr. Deborah Dupree, the Mindset Doc. Welcome to Decoding the Conflict Mindset. Hi, I'm Dr. Deborah Dupree, and I'm delighted to have you join us today. With me is Gary Miles. And Gary, just welcome and thanks for being here today.
Wow, thank you, Deborah, so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, great. Well, I'm really excited to have you here as a guest on Decoding the Conflict Mindset. You have a fascinating background with over 40 years of being in the legal business and been a trial lawyer, a managing partner, a leader, an entrepreneur, and now you specialize in coaching for the lawyer seeking transition. Did I get that right?
Yes, I coach lawyers who are not where they want to be. They're in some way unsatisfied, unfulfilled, stressed, overwhelmed, burned out. And I feel like so much of those are things we can control with our own mindset.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. I've learned to do full disclosure myself because I've worked all my life around attorneys, but I've actually been married to two. So, so people, don't you learn? It's like, well, there's something about the legal mindset, though, that I love the analytical ability of it, and working through problems and things like that. And yet, I know firsthand that lawyers can get trapped in that mindset, and I mean, we know that divorce rates are high. Gaining weight is a frequent factor that we see lawyers experience over their lifetime. That certainly happened in both of my marriages, and certainly substance abuse can be a problem, and so a lot of unhappiness.
Yes, it can. And I've experienced some of those. You may know I'm in recovery. I've been a recovering alcoholic for quite a while. And that was something I struggled with as well, and still, live a life of recovery. And really, I've had so much transformation there. It's been one of the greatest gifts in my life.
Wow, wonderful. Yeah. I like to say out of adversity comes opportunity. Out of our moments of pain comes the momentum for gain. So sometimes we have to hit sort of rock bottom or be pretty miserable before we have that wake-up call and say, I've got to do something different. I know I've had that myself back in 2011, actually. I just had experienced a lot of death in my family, and I had become very anxious, just what's going to happen next? And that went on for about 5 years prior to that. And I finally said, I have to change my life.
Good
and
for
so,
you.
yeah, thank you. And it's been an incredible
just to echo
journey.
what you're saying, the studies have shown incredible health risks or stress on lawyers' health. The ABA has shown there's an unusually high rate of substance abuse. Like you said, there are a lot of lawyers who have unhealthy nutritional and using substances to handle the stress, and there are better ways than that. And even sadly, the legal profession has one of the highest suicide rates of any profession, which is really sad.
Very sad, yes. And I'm really pleased, to see the increased emphasis and attention that I see the ABA giving to our mental well-being and health, because there's certainly a lot of articles being published, a lot of programs being put out there, and so it's a tremendous shift in where we're going. Yeah. So, Gary, let's dive a little deeper then into your journey, and so that I better understand, our listeners and viewers better understand just what's promoted or prompted your own transformation.
Well, I think God placed enough circumstances in my life that I needed to find a solution, and I didn't know what the solution was, but I found it, and now I'm able to live life free, one day at a time, and not stuck in that prison anymore. And part of that process, though, was not just not drinking, but really changing who I was, how I handled life, realizing I don't control you or any other people in my life. I don't control circumstances in my life. I'm responsible for me, my thoughts, my feelings, and my actions, and just not as overwhelmed by things I can't control. I used to spend my life trying to control everyone's life around me and not paying any attention to my own. It's very frustrating. I was a people pleaser. I would try to get acclamation and commendation from other people. And sometimes I got it, sometimes I didn't. When I didn't get it, I was frustrated. Well, I realized now that doesn't really matter. What matters is being true to myself and being the best version of me that I can be.
Well, yeah, it's that shift in mindset is amazing and remarkable once you get there, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I think so many lawyers are focusing on things that cause them stress. They may have a partner who's very challenging, and so they get the card and they think, now I have to deal with that partner today. He's so difficult. And they've already sapped their energy before they walked in the door. Instead of maybe just accepting the fact that that's who I work with, that's who he is, and how do I handle that? How do I manage that? And if we can change kind of how we act towards that person, but mostly how we feel about it internally, so we don't focus on that negative energy, we're a lot freer of that.
Absolutely. And you made a very important point that I'd like to amplify there. So often we can get into the blame and shame. It's your fault. It's your problem. Why do you behave this way? Rather than saying, okay, how do I show up? And how might I be feeding into this? And so I put a lot of focus on, your presence matters, how you show up matters. And again, starting internally with yourself as far as how am I managing my reactions, what's triggering me, and how in being able to choose in those moments of mindfulness, and how I want to come across and how I can connect with somebody in a more positive, constructive, strategic way, rather than a reactive, explosive way, which happens so many times in relationships of all kinds.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think I have to realize that I play a part in almost every interaction that happens. And maybe someone else is 98% wrong and I'm 2%, but in some way I play some part. And that's the part I'm responsible for. Right. I have no control. I just have no control over the other person. And if I give them too much space in my head, that's a choice I'm making that saps my energy and puts me in a negative frame of mind and makes me feel more stress and be less effective.
Yeah. Well, I always like to say it takes two to tango.
Yes, it does.
But it only takes one person to change the direction of the dance. And so someone's got to take the lead, and that's oftentimes me, myself, and I.
Yeah, so many times I've been involved in litigation where the other lawyer is unusually nasty or aggressive. And I've been in a deposition where the other lawyer will respond, he'll raise his voice, and they'll interrupt each other, and soon they're off to the races. Right. And I learn when someone's like that with me, I lower my voice. If I start to talk and they interrupt me, I say, well, I'll let you finish. And then when they're finished, I say, you finished? And I'll in a very low tone of voice, start to speak and sort of making the point we don't have to argue that way. And I found that person has a really hard time arguing by himself if I don't feed into it.
That's a great point. By lowering your voice, just a simple strategy like that, again, being mindful enough to don't go where they go, or you both go down that slippery slope together. But by changing the tone of your voice and the volume of your voice really has a huge impact. I always like to share, 38% of how we communicate is through tone, volume, and inflection, not even what we're saying. And then, of course, 55% is what we see. So if we see a angry facial expression, heightens our antennas and it may trigger us into a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And so, it can be very reactive, and that's what we want to choose differently in how we show up.
I agree.
Gary, I'm curious, in today's world, what would you say are, 2 or 3, maybe 4 most common obstacles that lawyers face in today's world?
One is their perception that they don't have any time because they have to bill so many hours, are expected to do that, and it leaves them short for time for being mentored or mentoring others, for networking, for building their own book of business. And I think that creates a lot of stress. I think the other is personal relationships. Some lawyers work in toxic atmospheres, or some lawyers in litigation deal with other attorneys who are very toxic. And that can be very difficult. I know I've experienced that sometimes in the family law arena. And the third is just the speed of the practice. I actually grew up in an age where I would send you a letter, and who knows when it got to you, and who knows when you're going to answer, or when the letter you sent was actually going to be received by me. And so we had some urgent, I'd have to call you on the phone, and we actually have a personal connection where the conversation would usually go better. But now these emails come through. If you don't answer this in 3 hours, I'll assume you consent to what I ask. Like, where does that come from? Why does that have to, what if I'm out at a deposition or taking the morning off? And so the speed of and pressure of the practice has really, really improved.
I can really
it's not
see
improved,
that.
it's got worse, right? Sorry.
Yeah. So one is time, personal relationships, and then the speed of today's practice.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm curious then, is that what are some tools that lawyers might embrace on how to make a difference in at least one of those things to get started?
Well, with the stress, the one thing is to set some boundaries. We didn't used to have cell phones, and you'd go home, and we didn't used to have computers at home. So when you leave the office, there was a wall between work and home. And it could be someone would call you on the telephone, but generally when you were home, you weren't working. Well, now we have our cell phones, and we've all been set to work virtually. And it's very easy, out of a desire to please our partners, to satisfy our clients' needs, to be successful, to work all the time, to come home and check our phone or hop on the computer when we're with our family. So a large part of it is setting boundaries. And that might be difficult to say to a partner, I have enough, I can't do that, or this is a Saturday, can I get back to you on Monday? But it's very important to set some personal boundaries. I think the other thing with stress is, as hard as we work, we have to find time for ourselves. We have to choose to eat well, be careful of what we put in our body in terms of alcohol or other substances, get a good sleep pattern. My Apple phone tells me at 10:30 it's time to go to bed, and 10:30 to 6:30 is sort of my time frame. But we can just keep working, and then I got to relax. It's 11 o'clock. We get to bed at 12, and we're thinking about work. And find something we enjoy doing for fun. And during the day, take a break, get outside and take a walk. It's okay to just look at the internet, but we're still on the computer. Get some fresh air. Talk to a friend, have lunch with a friend, do something to take a break, during the day, and really engage in something that we love doing. And all those things can help to reduce that stress that we all feel.
Yes, and again, simple things that, again, people are mindful about that. It's about weaving that into your daily routine. And I want to add about the sleep thing. The sleep research, definitely stresses the importance of having a regular routine, a regular time frame for your sleep, and how critically important it is that we get at least 7 to 9 hours on a consistent basis. Once in a while we can pull not an all-nighter, can't do that anymore, but operating on less sleep. And a lot of people surprisingly do operate on 4 to 6 hours of sleep. But again, the research shows is that when that's your pattern, it definitely does impact your ability to focus, your attention to detail, and performance does drop down significantly. And it's almost, going back to the alcohol thing, it's almost, they say that the lack of chronic sleep is akin to, sort of having a couple alcoholic beverages in you. You're not quite sharp. You function, and you can somewhat safely drive, but you're not really all there. And so sleep is incredibly important, and as well as building in breaks throughout the day.
And you talked about efficiency. I think part of it is when we're overworked, we just flit from one thing to the next, and we start our day without a plan. And I find it really helpful to have a plan that from 8:30 to 9:30, I'm going to work on this file and do this. And that'll be my sole focus. And my trouble was I used to have a screen with my emails, and I'd be working on something. I see an email come through, and all of a sudden I'm leaving what I'm working on to go to answer that email, when the reality is it can wait. And I could set a time between 10:30 and 11 to answer all my emails instead of interrupting everything I'm doing to do that. So I think if we calendar our day and calendar our breaks into our day, we'll find we're much more efficient, much more productive.
Absolutely. That is one, a key element of time management as a whole, is structuring your day so that you can have that uninterrupted, focused time when you really need to work on something, but then also to use those, 5-10 minutes to answer a few emails, and even using your email responder to say, I'm unavailable from 10 to 2. I'll be returning messages later in the day. Now you've given people some expectation about what they can expect from you, rather than say, why didn't you answer my email right away? And that's particularly amplified through our use of texting. Why didn't you get back to me? So, well, I don't always look at my phone. And so I practice some of those same things like you do, is that let calls go to voicemail, and yet I know who's calling because of my caller ID. And then but my message says I'll get back to you within 24 to 72 hours. And if you need to reach me before then, please text me. And so again, people know what to expect. And so that can reduce their anxiety. I'll share a tip with you, Gary, because I know you shared earlier that people expecting a response within 3 hours. That's just simply unrealistic. And we know from the brain science, we really should be operating on that 24 to 72 hour cycle in terms of setting expectations, slowing down the pace. Because in reality, and you mentioned this already, is that in reality, there's seldom anything that is that urgent.
That is true. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you probably have heard the saying, don't make your urgency my emergency. And
Good saying. Yep.
Yep. Yeah. And do you have any other tools? And you talked about structure and managing time, getting good sleep, good night of sleep. Are there other tools that you use when you're working with your clients as far as helping them sort of reorder their lives?
Well, I think it's very important to really practice gratitude. So I have my clients each night write down the things that happened that day that were good, that they were grateful for. It could be a little thing, my spouse fixed me a nice lunch, or a case that worked out well. And every morning I ask them to get up and write 3 for a month, 3 things that they're grateful for. And the rule is they can't write the same thing twice. So you could say, I love my spouse and she's great, but that's only one. And after about 10 days or 15 days, they start to have to search for something to be grateful for in their life. And it's my belief that when I'm searching for something to be grateful for, I'm really in a much better frame of mind. I'm not as stuck in poor me, life is so hard, because I realize all I have to be grateful for. And then I suggest that before they go to bed at night, they read that list that they've created during those days, and they'll sleep better. Not only do you need to be in bed for 7 to 9 hours, you need to have good sleep. And if we go to bed in a good mindset, that really can happen. And as I said, the other thing I think is really important is acceptance of other people and circumstances. Some of them are very challenging. And when I have one of those challenging people or challenging circumstances, my question is, what can I learn from this? And how can I best respond? Rather than, boy, that person is treating me like it's such a jerk, the way they're treating me, or I can't believe this happened. Instead of all that feeling sorry for ourselves, just know that that's a circumstance we have to accept. And there are days when all the circumstances break our way. There are few. There are days when they don't, or people don't act towards us the way they should or the way we want them to. And then we just have to accept that and choose how we want to feel about that.
Well, gratitude and acceptance. That that is such those are such key elements to a whole mindfulness approach, and in reprioritizing what's important, and what brings you satisfaction, what brings you happiness. And I find so many people, and a lot of what you're talking about applies to many different kinds of professions. And so I find so many people just living day by day with and that's good in one hand, but without really any vision for how they want their life to look, and then actually work towards that, and live in it, be in it, and make that their reality, rather than this dream down the road. Or how many times do we hear, oh, when I retire, then I'll do that, and that's a
Yes.
long time to wait.
Yes, it is. Yes, it really is.
When you are working with clients, uh, what are some examples of how you do support? You already talked about having them write a journal of gratitude, and for 30 days. How else do you support lawyers who are seeking to make this kind of shift in their lives?
I always send them out some questions to focus on before we get started. We deal with some different things. Like I usually have a session that's based on goal setting and obstacles, because so often they don't really know what their purpose is in their life. So often we as lawyers, no one goes into law schools thinking, I'm going into law school to make a lot of money. They usually have more of a thought, I'm going into law school because I want to make a difference, or I want to help people. But yet they get into working and they may have some student loan debt, and they're getting paid a good bit of money, and their focus becomes billing more hours, bringing in new clients. It's all money centered. So I help them to really see what your purpose is. Do you want to work this hard and make this amount of money? Do you want to have your own firm and choose your own life and your own journey? Do you want to work in maybe a smaller firm that's a little less intense, maybe a little less money, maybe more family oriented? What is it you want in your life? And how can we get you there? And what do you find fulfilling in your life? What makes you whole? And for most people, the nice car and the nice home seldom in themselves create fulfillment. That's not what makes us happy. I've learned that if it's a big house or small house, it doesn't really matter. It's the experience that fulfills us. And what do we find fulfilling as attorneys? For me, it's being of service to others. When I really help someone else achieve their goal, achieve their dream. When I did family law, when I'd have a great result for a client and they'd write me a nice thank you note, they'd pay the bill, but they'd send me a thank you note, which they didn't have to, with their heartfelt words of appreciation. That really made me feel fulfilled. And that's what created satisfaction for me. So I help them focus on their goals and what their obstacles are. And once we identify their obstacles, we help them to overcome them. And it's so many of the same problems that people deal with: people pleasing, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, expectations. I tried cases and I always expected to win. And I knew I was good, and I thought I was going to win, and I thought I should win. And when I won, it didn't matter to me because I expected it. I didn't get any joy out of it. But when I lose a case, I'd be crushed. I'd be devastated because I was expecting to win. So expectations are a problem. Comparison is a problem. You can be in a law firm and see someone else who looks better or has a better car or maybe got a certain case that you want to, and we start comparing ourselves to others without looking at the whole picture. We don't think about how we might have something they don't, or how we might be stronger in certain areas. We only look at, their strengths and compare it to an area where we're weak. So many of us struggle with so many of those things.
Yes. One of the things you said there, I'd like you to say a little bit more about that, is that, when we talk about comparison and again, measuring ourselves up, well, what do you have that I don't have? And, what do I want more of? And so it's a lot of external focus. You mentioned the imposter syndrome. And so I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure.
You see that a lot.
I actually released a podcast on this back in early December about the imposter syndrome. And I was subject to it. I graduated #1 law school class. I clerked in federal court. I learned how to try cases. I tried well. I managed my firm. And yet it all seemed like pretend. Like, I hope no one finds out this isn't real. This isn't who I really am. And it was. I mean, it was how people saw me. It was my track record. It was my reputation. But for some reason, I didn't believe it. I thought I was never good enough. And a lot of it comes from really accepting who we are giving ourselves credit for what we've done, practicing a little self-compassion. My wife can make a mistake and drop something. Oh, that's fine, honey. That's not a problem. I drop a glass of tea and it shatters the floor. And what a dummy. Why did you do that? And we're so hard on ourselves. Our expectations are that we have to be perfect or flawless. Maybe it began when we were competing to get into law school, or competing in law school for a higher class rank, or competing to become partner. And we feel like we're just never good enough. And my message is we're all good enough as we are. And that doesn't mean we can't improve. So when I compare, I like to compare myself to the me of yesterday or the me of last year. And what do I need to do better? How can I get better? But not to compare myself to others.
Mm-hmm. So very true. Again, you use that word comparison, and we again want to develop a mindset, a vision of, well, where am I today? Where was I yesterday? And where do I want to be tomorrow? And
Yes.
and I know, and I'm sure you saw this in your law practice and with the lawyers that you work with, that too often people get stuck in the past and lament and are remorseful and kick themselves, proverbially in the head, a lot of negative self-talk. And
Yes.
And then that shows up in your demeanor and how you come across to people. And so it's like, okay, what can I learn? And you mentioned this earlier. What can I learn from what's gone well and what hasn't gone well? And what can I change?
One of the first things I do with my clients, one of my first sessions, is on dealing with our past. Because even so often we get messages from well-intended people, our loving parents or teachers or friends at school, that convince ourselves that we're too slow, or we're not good looking enough, or we're not talented enough, or we're not something enough. Usually the messages we get are often negative ones. They're the ones that stick in our mind. And then we may have done things that we're not happy about and we regret, but we don't really deal with that. Or we may have resentments against things other people have done to us. We keep reliving those pains, and all of those things drain us of our energy.
Absolutely. When again, you're working with lawyers, what kind of time frame are you talking about in terms of helping people make a shift? I know you talked about doing the journaling for 30 days, but again, what can our viewers and listeners expect if they were to work with someone like you or work with you? What kind of time frame are we talking about making some change?
Well, what I try not to schedule them too close together, because I really want my clients to do some work in between. Some tasks that I like them to try to do to start changing these. So I usually we meet once every 3 or 4 weeks, usually in 5 or 10 session groups.
Okay.
And usually with 5 or 10 sessions, I can really change the direction of where they are and really how they feel about themselves and how they feel about their life.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I know that's consistent with, what we know from a behavioral psychology perspective too, is that, you can expect to make change in the first 90 days, but then you really need additional time to maintain and sustain that and really make it the fabric of your life. And, so with that, then it's like if somebody started working with you, say the 1st of January, they could expect their life to look very different by June or July, right?
Absolutely. There's no question about that. And
So,
it's the kind of thing, if you have someone help you or guide you or mentor you, someone speaking with you for an hour doesn't create the change. No. The change really is in the daily work we do after that. So if I talk to someone about not having expectations, and I ask them to journal about that, but they don't, and they just keep doing what they did all the time, it doesn't work. So it really requires our input. But to answer your question, in 6 months, absolutely, there could be some monumental changes. And it may or may not change their law practice immediately, but it'll change how they show up, how productive they are, how happy they are, their relationships, all those things which really create satisfaction and fulfillment in our life.
Very good. Very good. I know I sometimes will use the analogy to medicine, so it's like, let's say you've got something going on in your life and you're not as healthy and you want to feel better. And so you go to your medical doctor, you have a checkup, the doctor, prescribes or recommends that you do certain things, and then you don't do it. And then you wonder why you're not getting better. And so would you do that, with your doctor when they tell you what to do? And yet so often, particularly as a psychologist, I find people not doing their homework, or as a coach, it's like, well, if you don't apply what we've been talking about, then how can you expect change to manifest itself?
Exactly. Couldn't agree more.
Yep. So Gary, I'm curious then to share with our viewers and listeners. I know one of the photos you shared with me was you with your dog, I believe, at a beach, right?
Yes.
And so, what do you do to take care of yourself? To give our listeners an idea of what have you put together in your life to address your own stresses?
Well, I eat very well. I'm very focused on healthy nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
I get a good night's sleep. I try to be in bed 8 hours every night. And usually my phone tells me I slept for about 7.5 hours, which is good. I don't know how it knows, but somehow it knows. I'm an avid golfer. I play regularly. My golf coach has always told me that is a great way to create freedom, because you can't play golf well if you're thinking about other things. Trouble was yesterday when I played, I knew I was thinking about other things. It was I have to control our mind there too. I do have 2 beautiful English golden retrievers. They're sweet, gentle, kind, and loving. I love taking them for a walk. I'm kind of self-absorbed because I love when people say, "Oh, they're the most beautiful dogs." I go, "Yes, they are." And I go to the gym regularly every other day. So I really, for me, exercise, is very, very important. And then I just try to relax some at night.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's great because I have a dog too, and she's very cute, and so I get a lot of people who will stop me and say, "Oh, she's so cute," and want to come up and talk. So she's a great conversation starter when I'm out. So I share that with you too. Yes, and
dogs are just incredible creatures because they're so every dog is like unconditionally loving. Yes. All they want to do is love you. Mm-hmm. Just be submissive and wag their tail and greet you, no matter how cranky I am when I come home. They're always happy to see me.
Right. So it's almost like what lessons can we learn from our pets?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's really great. And so, Gary, if you had one parting message, or maybe share with our people viewing our interview, how might they reach you, or what's one message that you want to give out to them?
So I think my message for any lawyer who feels stressed or overwhelmed, or any professional, doesn't have to be lawyers, is realize you're not alone. There are other people who have felt the way you do, and ask for some support, whether it's from a coworker, a spouse, a good friend, a mentor, or a mental health therapist, but you're never alone, and ask for support. That doesn't make us weak. That really is a sign of strength and courage to know that we need some support and to get it. And know you have choices. If you're not really happy with where you are, you're never stuck. Sometimes people feel like they're stuck, but we're not. We can always choose a different path. So folks can reach me. I'm very active on LinkedIn under my name, Gary Miles. My website is garymiles.net, and folks can always email me at gary@garymiles.net.
Very good. Well, wonderful. In fact, we met on LinkedIn, and so I think our overlapping messages are what drew us together. And so It's been very good to follow what you do. And you read some great articles and tips. So I encourage people to connect with you on LinkedIn and get access to some of the insights that you so readily share and pass on.
Thank you, Deborah.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Well, thank you, Gary, for being here today. And so, folks, you hear it from Gary Miles, the success coach, and the free lawyer is his goal in helping those of you who are not so satisfied with how things are going in your life. And so thank you for joining us, because today we really took a look at decoding our own conflict mindset and some things that we can do differently to move forward. And so, again, if you like this episode, please share it, pass it on. Maybe you know of a friend or two or more that might benefit from listening to Gary and his ideas, and particularly, our focus on time, relationships, and
the pace of life.
The pace of life. There we go. Thank you so much. Yes. And so again, Dr. Deborah Dupree, the Mindset Doc, and decoding the conflict mindset. Again, pass it on, share it. Don't hold on to it. Let people know that there are ways to move forward. And Gary Miles, success coach, is one way to do that. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Well, I certainly hope that you enjoyed what Gary Miles had to bring to us in terms of the free lawyer. What a concept. Again, he had lots of good ideas as far as how we can get out of our own way and some of the challenges that we face when we succumb to other ways. So pay attention, learn, and live through what Gary has to say. Imagine where you could be if you were working with somebody like Gary. Well, let's move on, because I want you to mark your calendars for our next DCM guest. She's pretty amazing. Her story is amazing. A divorce mediator, Judith Weigel, comes to us with an incredible background in marketing for a circus. Can you believe it? And yet what she shared with us is that, what she learned about respect, inclusion, diversity, and just an appreciation for the differences that we have in life. And so what Judith brings to us, and this is why you have to mark your calendar for just 2 more weeks, is that she has a recipe, 4 key ingredients on how to have a heart-healthy divorce. Is that even possible? Divorce is second to death. And so, but she does have some amazing insights, years of experience. So do mark your calendar. Subscribe to get future notifications, pass it forward, share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues, and maybe particularly for those going through divorce. Again, Judith would be an excellent resource, and we even had something in common going back to our high school years. We both played the flute. Come and listen. Judith Weigel, divorce mediator specialist, and I can't wait to have her on the show.